Is being a commercial fisherman or an oil rig worker more dangerous than being a cop? Statistically, maybe. But there's one huge difference. No one is actively trying to kill them.
It was at that moment that I made that decision, and so did Bad Guy. He pulled the trigger on his gun and shot me like dead X in the forehead.
Meet Nick McCarthy, retired canine handler from Daly City, California. Nick comes from a family full of cops, but he took a very different path. He ran with the wrong crowd, got into serious trouble, until one YouTube video about police dogs completely changed his life. In this raw interview, Nick opens up about what proactive policing really looks like on the street, how he became a canine handler, and some of the shocking incidents that forced him to retire early. If you're in law enforcement, thinking about joining, or just want the unfiltered truth about what this job does to people, you're in the right place. This is Reasons We Serve, real stories from the men and women who protect us. This is his story. Can you introduce yourself for me, please?
Yeah, my name is Nick McCarthy. I'm a retired cop out of Daly City, California.
Okay, Daly City, California. Tell me where that is, because I have no idea.
So it is the first city south of San Francisco. So Daly City borders the Bayview district of San Francisco.
Okay.
Pretty much.
And you're kind of unique, I think. When I talk to people, they don't really know what they want to do and everything else. I want to get a little bit in history in terms of why you went into law enforcement, because I think it's fair to say you didn't really think about it, even though your family is just like generation upon generation. But you wanted to be a canine cop from the very beginning. Right. Why?
I think, well, it was definitely because of the relationships that I had between me and my pet dogs that I had growing up. Throughout my childhood, I just gravitated towards dogs. I had 2 German Shepherds growing up, and they were everything to me. You know what I mean? So it just, that companionship, the feeling I got when I was around those types of dogs, or any dogs really. And so it was originally looking into dog training, right? It was like, hey, how can I incorporate dogs into a career field? At that time, I didn't even think that law enforcement had dogs. For whatever reason, it just didn't click. I'm sure we'll get into more as to why. Back in those days, I was, trying to be something I wasn't, and now all of that. So yes, dogs were a huge part of my life growing up. So that definitely was the driving force to it.
But it was like a YouTube video that you were watching that kind of set you on your course, right?
Exactly how it went down. I had a notepad and I had bullet points as to, ideas for careers. And I got to the canine training aspect of it, went to YouTube, I started looking at videos of dog trainers, obedience training and, everything. And I look to the right and I see like a preview video of police canine, right? It was like some sort of police canine training or trial or something that they did. And I clicked it and I'm like, and it was like a light bulb, right? Like, oh man, police officers have dogs. Like it was like a revelation. Like, I obviously knew there was canine handlers with my entire family being in law enforcement. My dad had friends that were handlers. I would pet their dogs and see them. So it just was one of those things. It was like, oh man, this is what it is. And as soon as I clicked that and went down that rabbit hole of finding more videos of training, I definitely knew what I wanted to do.
So tell me a little bit about your family and the law enforcement background that's here in your family, and why it wasn't just in the very beginning, why you said, hey, this is what I want to do. I want to go into law enforcement, but that wasn't how it was for you.
Yeah, I big Irish law enforcement family. My grandfather was retired FBI, naval intelligence. Uncles were cops. My dad was a cop. My stepmom was a cop. My stepdad was a cop. Cousins, friends. So to me, law enforcement was so prevalent that I think it just didn't captivate me as if it would, anybody else who maybe didn't have people in their life that was in law enforcement. Dinner table was like a graveyard briefing to me, you know what I mean? And I was just around it so much that I almost felt like I kind of want to do something different just because there's so many people in my family that are law enforcement. And what I didn't realize back then was being around my family, hearing the stories, being taught by them, just life skills translated into everything that I needed once I hit the street as a cop. And so that molding process, I think, happened when I was young and had that foundation of really understanding what police work was from a kid hearing story perspective. But once I got into the police academy, it was like, wait a minute, I know this already. I've heard this. I kind of understand where this is going because of what I was around. So it was a little bit of like, hey, I want to do something different. And, I grew up not really liking cops, right? Like I every chance I could, I was like, oh, there's a cop there. Let me turn left so they don't write me a ticket for my window tint or something like that, So it wasn't that I was a bad kid getting in trouble and going to jail and struggling in those ways. I just was, I had my head up my ass when I was younger, man. I was trying to be somebody I wasn't, thinking that I was Mr. Tough Guy and law enforcement was the opposite, I thought, right? They were the repercussions. They're going to tell me what I can't do, and I don't want that. So,
but why do you think you had that attitude when you had all this family background? You think, I see cop kids go one or two ways.
Right.
I've had friends that have been cops that are just completely rebellious little shits, right? And then you have other ones that are on the straight and narrow. Why do you think that you kind of didn't go the straight and narrow path with all your family history?
So when I was like 5, my parents divorced. So, I had the ability of going to my mom's house for a week, my dad's house for a week. And there was a lot of independence there and a lot of, hey, you need to step up to the table even when you're 10, 11 years old, as far as, watch out for your sisters and things of that nature. And I found myself with friends that probably weren't the best friends for me and just kind of steered me into a path of, just being tattoos and partying and not, because it was easy, right? Law enforcement takes work, a lot of work. And I was lazy. I shortchanged myself in every direction I could because it was the easy route. And, everybody in my family didn't take the easy route. Well, actually, I'll take that. There is one that that isn't a cop, who's probably my favorite person on earth. But I honestly think it was that. My big Irish law enforcement family who held themselves to that standard constantly and were all about work ethic. And I had a good work ethic when I was younger, but, the easy route was easy. And I think that I kind of threw myself into that bucket of like, hey, instead of working hard and accomplishing this, why don't I just be kind of lazy and go the fun route, right? Where it's ditching school and drinking beers with your buddies, because that's easier than going to class and doing assignments and being told what to do. And I think it was that. I think it was a little bit of, generational stuff. I was really into racing motocross when I was younger, dirt bikes, and that was my world and all my friends' world. So back then, 2006, 2005, 2006, there was a cultural change within that motocross type of deal where there was freestyle motocross and everyone was tattooed and partying and that captivated me too. I loved, jumping and doing all those things. So I think it was a little bit of that too, where it was like, it's cool to be that. It's not cool to want to be a police officer at 11, 12, 13, 14, as you go into high school. Like I wanted to be the cool guy, right? I was trying to be somebody I wasn't. And so that really is laziness, man.
What I found interesting about you, and you just mentioned it, was the fact that you were a hard worker from the very beginning. So you basically started life pretty early. I mean, I think you said at maybe 18 you moved out. I think you got married at 18.
No, married at 23.
23, but you met your wife in high school.
Yeah.
You're still married to this day.
Yeah.
Where do you think that work ethic came from, though? Even though you're quote unquote not a good kid at that point, right? Where did that come from?
So in growing up, it wasn't as if I don't want to paint myself in this light that I was some asshole terrible kid, right? It was reaching that point before I had some really good people in my life check me and steer me in the right direction. But that work ethic absolutely came from my family, came from my dad, came from my mom. That was one of the main things their expectation was, you're going to work hard in everything you do. But once I found that I can go out and earn money on my own, and that money increases based off of my work ethic, that independence alone just transitioned me into that straight and narrower road of growing up.
So besides the YouTube video where you saw the canine, you started working, you were making $12 an hour and going, yeah, this isn't going to cut it. Was that kind of the reason, that and the video, that you
Sure.
went, hey, I'm gonna take this?
100%. Right after, through it was senior year of high school, I got hired by a lumber yard in Black Point, Nevada, California. It's called Kelleher Lumber. And it was hard work, man. 100 degrees, you're putting lumber on your shoulder. I mean, it was back-breaking work. And you're working in these super hot sheds, and I was the youngest in the actual company at that time. When they first hired me, I wasn't 18 yet, so I could only do specific things at the yard. But once I turned 18, it was a full-time gig, making $12 an hour. Now the workforce that was there, not all of it, but a good percentage of it were people that they would get off of like work programs, people who were paroling out of prison, would go into a halfway house and go into a work program. We would grab them, they would be a worker, and they'd be right next to me. And you talk about life lessons, like that. It was a huge time in my life. And I thought, like, hey, I'm a little out of place here. I can tell. But all of those people there saw that I was younger, saw that I shouldn't make a career out of this, right? And really helped me. I mean, I remember sitting on lunch with there's a Jamaican dude called Lenny. His name's Lenny, and he's sitting there and he's actually smoking a blunt, right? And he turns to me, he goes, "You don't want to do this for the rest of your life." I go, "No, I know, I don't." He goes, "No, I'm going to make sure you don't do this." They knew my dad was a cop, and I remember him telling me, he's like, "Go be a sheriff like your dad." And I'm like, "Well, he's not a sheriff." He's like, "Yeah, he is. Just they're the same thing." So, I realized, like, hey, as soon as I turned 18, my wife and I, we went and we rented our first house. And now I have rent, I have electricity, I have garbage, I have all of these bills that I need to pay. $12 an hour isn't cutting it. And, in that environment where I was working, there was no real, raises that you're going to get substantial to the point where it would make it easy for me to live a life I wanted. Because I wanted to buy a house. I wanted to get married. I wanted to have kids. I wanted to have a nice truck and money to where, I wasn't worried. I wanted that type of life. And I was, looking for career fields that, one, captivated me because I wanted to do them, but also came with a financial stability, retirement, things like that. And so that's really what brought me to that computer. I was like, all right, I got to figure something out, because I can't do this for the rest of my life. I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. And that, conversation I had with myself definitely was the reason why I, had my bullet points on my notepad, and I was on YouTube trying to figure out what I was going to do for a living.
When you make the decision to go into law enforcement, tell me how it works in California, because it differs from state to state, and I know it's 2026, but you went through this in the 2000s. So how did it work? Did each department have their own academy, or did you have to pick out a specific academy? You get your, whatever it is, your certification, and then you pick it out from there? What happens?
So in California, for the most part, it's different than out here. Your police departments don't have their own academies. Now, big agencies, San Francisco Police Department, they have their own police academy. LAPD, they have their own police academy because they're massive agencies. But normally what you try to do is you try to put an application in with the police department, get hired and sponsored, right? You haven't been to the police academy yet. You can't go on the street into FTO, but you are hired by that police department. They will then finance you to go into the police academy, pay for, the academy, pay you while you're there. And then when you graduate and you get your certificate, you go straight into getting sworn in, straight into FTO. The other way to do it, the way I did it, was you self-sponsor yourself. You go to a junior college that has a police academy. For us, it was the Santa Rosa Junior College. And I applied for the academy, paid for the academy, and put myself through that academy. At that time, I had some background stuff. I smoked weed. I had, gotten into some fights. I had my background that I knew, like, hey, I need some time and distance on this. So if I self-sponsor myself, that'll give me time, but it'll also, show departments, hey, I want this. I'm going to put myself through it. And since I had a full-time job and I had bills, I had to do what's called the modular police academy. So it was the part-time police academy. I had to go to the academy it was like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday from like 5 o'clock at night to 10 o'clock at night, and then all day Saturday for a year. So I had that year-long time, and it was at a part-time basis, but I self-sponsored myself through. So then when you graduate and you're like, hey, here's your credentials, you can be a cop if you get hired. Now it's incumbent upon you to go put in applications, test, and try to get hired by an agency.
So how do you end up at Daly City?
Well, it took me about a year after graduating. Put applications in to, tons of police departments, tested well in some, tested terrible in others. And it's a funny story. So my uncle and my cousin had worked for Daly City Police Department at that time. I think my uncle had just retired. He was a sergeant there, but my cousin had been there for, 6-7 years at that time. And I knew nothing about Daly City, knew nothing about Daly City Police Department. I never even researched it whatsoever. And I remember sitting in my living room and I had applications, and they call it a PHS, personal history statement. And I had them all on the ground in my living room, and I go, okay, I'm in backgrounds with this agency. I have an oral board with this agency next week. So I was trying to organize myself, and I get a call from my cousin on my cell phone. He's like, hey, he didn't come to my graduation in the police academy. He's like, hey, congratulations that you made it. I'm proud of you on that. We're hiring. I'm like, okay. Should I put in an application? He goes, why do you think I'm calling you? I'm like, oh, that makes sense. So I put an application in. I get an oral board date. I go in, I test, and I tested well, went through backgrounds, and they took a chance on me. Agencies had told me no before because of the marijuana usage. I had smoked weed like 2.5 years prior to trying to get hired, and they needed 3. Daly City was like, we're going to bypass that, right? You tested well. You have an explanation as to, these things that we have questions about, but we're going to give you a shot. And the rest really is history. That's how that happened.
Do you think they took a chance on you because of their family? Because the way that you kind of tell me is your family members that were there were very well respected.
Totally.
Do you think that they took a chance on you because of that?
I do. I think I don't think that's the whole reason, but I certainly think it is a good portion of that reason. I think they saw in me what they saw in my cousin, in my uncle. I think those attributes that my family has, and really all of them do, even if they're not cops in my family, we all have this same foundation of well-roundedness, right? Common sense-based thinking. We're not going to lie to you. We're gonna lay on the sword if we make a mistake, right? And I think they saw that, and they recognized, like, hey, these are what we want. We can mold him into a Daly City police officer. It may take a little bit, may have to do some things over here to get him up to speed, but we do think that he'll be a good fit here. And in Daly City, you need to be a good fit for that agency, and that's a fact, right? Even back then when I got hired, they didn't, put out mass hiring deals. Like, there's a website called CalOps, right? And that's where all these police departments put out, hey, we're hiring. Like, very seldom did you see Daly City Police Department on there. They would mainly hire people that were references that come in, right? Cop from Daly City says, hey, my brother just went through the police academy. Take a look at him, right? And that's really how they hired up until about that point. So you needed to fit a specific mold for Daly City. They wanted someone who was going to come through the door with a work ethic based off finding bad people and taking them to jail.
Fair to say that Daly City's in a high crime area?
Fair to say. Yeah, certainly not the highest of highs crimes in California, but yes, yeah, there were some definite high crime areas in that city.
Okay, and then so how big is the department?
When I was working there, I think we were about 100, 105 sworn.
Okay.
So maybe mid-size agency.
Okay, so give me an idea. What's it like working patrol in a high crime area like Daly City? Then you start off. Are there any surprises? Do you go, "Whew, I didn't
Oh
see
yeah.
that coming"?
Oh yeah. So, you know, growing up in Petaluma, California, where I grew up, is about an hour north of where Daly City is. Couldn't be two polar opposite places. As soon as you cross that Golden Gate Bridge, you're now entering into a totally different environment. One that I wasn't fully prepared for or had really any understanding of, right? That inner city environment, big city environment, there's a lot of things that come with that I hadn't dealt with, hadn't experienced, nothing. And I think the biggest thing I recognized is how different the real world is to you when you're in civilian clothes and what that real world looks like when you're in a police uniform. That the two different contrasts of what the day-to-day of Daly City, what it looks like, what it smells like, I'm driving through Daly City and I see refrigerators thrown on the sidewalk with a mattress on it, a bunch of garbage, and people are just kicking it and walking by. You know what I mean? And I'm like, that's something I haven't seen before. Like, why is it so filthy? Really, honestly, but it, yes, that specific, eyesight, graffiti, the inner city lookings of what a city like that brings was so polar opposite of what I was used to. But it was like I said, what that real world looks like, right? The different environment that I saw through the lens that I was in a police uniform. That was the biggest eye-opening thing for me. I said, wow, I thought I knew what real world was, but I had no idea, to be honest with you.
Yeah. So do you think what do you think the biggest lie people believe about police work today? What do you think as a general thing with society? You got to. We're going to talk about social media and stuff in a second, but what do you think the biggest lie people think about?
That we're out there to hurt people. We're out there to be malicious with our intentions based off someone's skin color, right, their religion or whatever. And it couldn't be farther from the truth. Now, do we have bad apples in our career field? Absolutely. Absolutely we do. Just as any other career field has it. But yeah, the hey, there's that cop, any cop in a police uniform, he must have a malicious intention to come out and hurt people, right? Like that racism is one you hear all the time, especially where I was working. And that's 100% an absolute lie. I never experienced anything like that. No one I worked with, nothing. We're colorblind in the sense we're going after people who commit crime. That's it. We don't care what you look like. We don't give it, all shapes and sizes, man. It doesn't matter to us. But I would certainly say that law enforcement is there with this expectation of like, hey, we're here. How many fights can we get in today? How many people can we beat up today and take to jail, right? That is the biggest fallacy, I would say, for sure.
You get with Daly City and you describe it as a proactive. These old guys are teaching you how to be proactive. Mm-hmm. Tell the audience what the difference between being a proactive officer as opposed to a reactive officer.
Right. Proactive officer isn't going to sit and wait for a call to come in, right, to turn their car on and go drive to that call. Proactive cop is going to be driving around proactively trying to find crime before it happens. Proactive crime or proactive police work right now in the day we're in, it's thrown out a lot. People always, you need to be proactive. You need to be proactive. Now there's a ton of different levels of being proactive, right? You can be proactive and find a bad guy, but you also have to be proactive and have an ability to take on the bad guy, right? Because you can find them all you want, but if you're not well-rounded enough and proactive enough to be able to open your door and safely handle that bad guy, then you're not being proactive, right? So it really is going out and finding crime, protecting the people you swore an oath to protect, right, before they get victimized. I think it's the most important aspect of law enforcement. Absolute most important.
There's a little bit of pushback from the proactive. Why do you think it's controversial? Why do you think people see it as controversial?
Yeah, in my opinion, I think it's controversial because when you're being proactive, inherently, bad things happen. right? When you're looking for what we call, well, in my agency, we call them the boogeyman. When you're out there looking for the boogeyman enough, you're going to find him. And when you do, he's not someone who wants to go along with the program, right? He's not someone who is going to go, oh, okay, sir, I'm sorry I did that. Here's my hands and go ahead and handcuff me, right? So when you're being proactive in a high crime area or even in a not high crime area, you're actively looking for people who don't want you to find them, right? Because they are committing crimes. So I think the pushback is everybody gravitates towards the end result, right? The officer-involved shootings, the fights you see. And yes, that does come with proactive police work, because you're not proactively going out and trying to find the soccer mom who's going 10 miles an hour over the speed limit. Now, there are traffic cops who that is what they do, and that is a proactive side of police work. But from a street cop's perspective, right, you are proactively trying to find the person who is going to commit a crime, right, before they do. And that end result, not all the time, but there's a higher percentage that you're going to get into a physical altercation with these people because they're not your average Joe. They're not the people who are going to work and coming home. And not to say that that can't happen, right? There's people who just have a bad day, right? And make a bad decision, and then the snowball effect from there. But when you're really looking for it, right, unfortunately, that's when these kind of high-level YouTube video, OIS, body cam videos come out. That's the end result. It's certainly not what we advocate for. Like we don't want to get into shootings. We don't want to go on foot pursuits in areas where we don't know where we're, you know what I mean, what's around the corner. But when you're working proactively, you have to understand that that's where you're going to find yourself most of the time. And it is really like luck that you don't get into those physical altercations. And so, yeah, I think that's where the pushback comes from. People don't understand all the work it took to get to that point. They don't understand the decisions that bad guy made, which made that police officer react in that way. And I think there's a problem with communication from law enforcement and communicating that in a way that I think people can understand it easier. I think when law enforcement has a big incident, they come out and they try to be so professional. They use words that people, they explain it in a way that people have no idea what they're talking about, really. They leave the press conference with more questions than they have answers. And so, yeah, like, you use an OIS for instance, and it may look bad, right?
And hold on. OIS for the audience is officer-involved shooting.
Yes, officer-involved shooting. In the optics, right, what it looks like from just that snapshot of the 15 seconds, right, what it looks like is can be absolutely explained, right, and actually is reasonable for those circumstances if you would have taken the time to understand what happened prior, right? So they just see that end result. They just see this big physical altercation or a shooting or something, and they immediately go, oh, wow, that cop just shot that guy for no reason. But there's no information. They have no idea the backstory. They have no idea why we were being proactive in that area. They have no idea what that individual made a decision, which led to that. So I think it's just, the general public sinking their teeth in the end result instead of the entire picture, right? The totality of that entire incident.
You started in 2014, and I can't remember when Floyd happened and whatever, but you obviously had some incidents where there were some protests going on and stuff.
Right. Oh yeah.
Well, how was it when you started in 2014? What was the attitude towards society, towards you as a police officer? Did it get worse until you retired?
100%. When I started, it was a completely different relationship between, general public, people we were coming in contact with, and law enforcement. Now, when I started, I think it was 6 months after I started, or maybe, no, it was less than that, is when Michael Brown was shot and killed in Ferguson, Missouri. And that's when Defund the Police and Black Lives Matter, that initiated, really. Mm-hmm. It was at that moment, during that time is when I saw that shift. And all it did was get worse and worse and worse. The attitude towards law enforcement was, you're the enemy now, right? And since the start of law enforcement, we've always been somewhat of, hated, I would say, by some folks. But it's because we stand for that repercussion side of bad decisions, right? So that was nothing new, but it was the amount, right? It was like, you have this sliver of people who maybe not like law enforcement based off of their personal experiences with them or what have you. And once, these protests started happening, that sliver started to gain. And now it's like 50% of the population hates your guts and 50% of the population supports you. So it definitely got worse.
Was it one demographic though, or was it, everybody kind of?
Yeah, where specific to where I was working, it was kind of a collective feeling. It was everybody. It certainly wasn't a demographic that acted that way towards us more than any other. It definitely seemed like, man, this is the majority of everybody who's thinking this way, acting this way. And then I really saw it change with, the communication between us and people. I mean, you immediately stop a car and I'd have people sticking their head out the window, motherfucking me and calling me racist. And, before I even explained to them why I stopped them. And then the explanation would come and it's like, hey, the reason why I'm stopping you is because you don't have license plates on your car. And you know what I mean? So it created so much confrontation at the jump. From anything we did, it was met with resistance because that environment, right? They saw the Ferguson thing and media blew that out of, context tremendously. And now people are making decisions and they're holding on to those decisions as fact. And that's when it changed, man. And it went completely downhill ever since then.
As a young officer, what do you think the biggest mistakes a young officer makes when they start the job? Or is it just everything? It's just a learning process.
No doubt it's everything. But I would say the biggest thing is allowing that badge to increase your chest, right? They put on a uniform, they put that badge on, and they have this inherent, I'm Mr. Tough Guy now. I'm better than you because I'm wearing this. I'm in charge, right? And that goes to their head because it's a reality, right? Like, you now have the ability to take people's freedoms away from them. Like, you look at it, whatever president of the United States is president, that president can't walk out of the White House and go grab someone and put handcuffs on them. But you as a 21-year-old can, right? And that's a lot of responsibility, a lot of power. And so I think that does go to some young cops' heads.
Okay, so let me expound on that a little bit. Let's explore this. What prevents somebody from not letting that happen, as opposed to somebody getting badge heavy? Do you have an idea about that?
Yeah, I think preparation prior to getting into law enforcement will really help that. One, I also think a good culture within your agency will help that. Normally, before you get on to FTO, before you even hit the street, you're going to do an in-house period of training, right? So you're going to go over policies, like someone should be driving you around the city, showing you certain locations, where the jail's at, the hospital, all these things. And it is at that time where I think they need to take some time and talk to young cops about being well-rounded, right? But also, don't let the uniform dictate how you treat people. And that was a huge thing in my agency. They made it very, very clear that if that's the way you're going to be, you're going to find yourself in a different uniform. We don't play that game here. You need to be hardened for whatever situation requires you to be hardened, but you don't do it disrespectfully. And they took passion in that, right? It was that was the way I was raised in law enforcement. So in that in-house period of training, that's where it started. And I think that if agencies can adopt that and actually focus on that specific topic, I think it would transcend into the community members. They won't have as much cops who are dickheads, who are coming up to the window, being condescending to the soccer mom who's stressed out, who's maybe going 12 miles an hour over the speed limit, but she's got 6 kids in the back of the car, she's late, whatever, right? It'll allow that cop to be like, hey, I need to adapt to this environment that's in front of me, right? Soccer mom, instead of acting the way I might act to this documented gang member who's being mouthy with me, right? And once you find a real bad guy, right? You find a gang member and he's talking to you and you're rapping back and forth and you're telling him, hey, man, you're either going to shut your mouth or you're going to sit down. Like, that's the way this is going to work. Once you have that interaction, that alone will give you enough to make your chest big, right? And to think, oh man, like I'm a badass. And it couldn't be farther from the truth. So I think getting them at the point where they're brand new, right? And they could be a lateral officer who has 10 years on, who's coming into an agency, but being able to sit them down and say, look, we know you know how to do the job, but we're going to train you how to be, in my case, a Daly City cop, not a cop, but a Daly City cop. And this is how we do things. We don't treat people this way. Even in the worst of situations, right? We need to be professional enough and higher enough that we don't sink to that level and we don't disrespect people. And once you get that badge heaviness, other things can trickle into that, right? Bad decisions on the street, taking it too far, doing this, doing that, that absolutely is a contributing factor. So yes, I think focusing on that in the beginning before they hit the street will definitely help that.
And do you think for those officers that were trying to lateral over, do you think Daly City was specifically, maybe they were doing their homework and going, no, this dude has a reputation of being an asshole out on the street, we're not going to hire him?
100%. 100%. And that really is why I think, and I didn't realize this when I was working, right? I didn't understand how really lucky I was to be a part of that. I didn't understand really how unique that agency was until I really retired. Most agencies around that area, very micromanagey, very like, don't be proactive. We don't want to, we don't want anything bad to happen type of deal. And not to say every agency was like that, but Daly City didn't have any of that. There was no micromanaging. There was no sergeant breathing down your neck, right? They're like, we trust you. Here's the key to your car. You got a gun on your hip. We're not going to hold your hand through this, right? We trust you that you're going to make good decisions. And if you need something, you give us a call. And when you get the right people in that environment, they blossom, man. They flourish. They're like, holy, and that's, for me, being a kid that gravitated towards independence, that to me in an environment, in a law enforcement environment was amazing. And I just ran with it. And so, it definitely plays a huge role.
So I think it's fair to say that your work ethic translated over to when you started to work, because you led your department in arrests for a while. What separates an average cop from a top performer?
Well, a couple different things, I would think. One of the most important is your why. Why are you here? Why are you a cop? And, the answer you get is, well, I want to help people, right? You hear that in every single oral ward ever. But that pushback question is, well, how are you going to help people? What is your passion? Why are you here? Do you want to take bad people to jail, or do you want to just kind of do the bare minimum, right? Are you somebody who wants to exceed expectations, or are you cool just kind of floating where they are? And don't get me wrong, law enforcement needs both. Man, the way that I perceive law enforcement, the way I worked, my opinions on it are based off of how I worked. But I'm certainly not advocating that, proactive police work is the only way and should be the only way cops are. You need different caliber of cops in every agency doing different things. But the top performers are the ones that are well-rounded, right? They think, they make decisions based off of thought, not emotion. And they have this ability to slow things down in the moment. And that's, I've said that a million times to younger cops, and there's a lot that goes into that, right? A lot of preparation that goes into being able to slow things down and make the right decision under those stressful circumstances. But that's really what it is. It's your work ethic, your motivation, and why you're there. I had a passion. I was more proud of the patch I was wearing, not the badge. I take this thing. I don't give a shit about this. That patch is what I was motivated to go out and do what I did for, because I knew all the dudes that came before me built this place and built this reputation and did it the right way. And I wanted to be a part of that. And the only way I could have been a part of that was going out there and putting my work ethic to use. So those top performers never lose sight of that work ethic. They come to work every day with a fire under their ass to hunt the boogeyman. They're not there like, today I'm just going to sit under this tree and write these emails and maybe watch YouTube and wait for a call to come in. Will you have days like that? Absolutely, right? But it's not a consistent thing, right? And there's some cops who are okay with doing their duties, their job duties, and meeting the expectations and doing a great job, right? Looking professional, being professional, and handling calls and doing the job. But your top performers, they don't stay there, right? When there's no calls for service, they're out looking for something. And that's how you get it, right? And they're not okay with just one arrest. I'd come in with 3, 4, right? And some of them were small dope hooks, but that's that you're not satisfied. You're always wanting more.
I've spoken to other guys in other departments, and they describe cliques within the department, and and it creates a little bit of animosity. Sure. So in Daly City, you're describing a culture that seems pretty positive, right?
Yeah.
By being one of the top performers, by getting all those arrests. Did you ever get any pushback from, like, I always say the old crusty guys going, right, hey, slow down, Junior.
Right.
Or just in general, did anybody give you any grief for that?
Sure. Well, yeah. I mean, you get your salty crew that works day shift, who's been there for 25, 30 years, and you're working overtime and you're trying to burn the world down, trying to find bad guys, and those dudes are sitting in beat 2 and they're like, dude, you need to stop this shit. Because I right? And that's more so out of a respect thing, right? Like for me, I'm like, all right, shit, I'm not gonna do this because I'm gonna adapt to my environment, right? Like today is an overtime day, it's a Monday. These dudes don't do proactive police work, but did, right? So now they're 25 years in the job, but their first 10, 15 years, they were doing exactly what I was doing. So I'm paying it back to them. I'm just not doing it on their shift. But the one thing about Daly City is what I would say is the whole agency was made up of people like me, right? We were all proactive because that's what Daly City was. That was their reputation. They wanted street cops, and they didn't want street cops who just go out and, burn the city down and not do a good job. They wanted, this is how it was. I want you to be a good, well-rounded street cop. I want you to have a sergeant capability, and I want you to have a detective capability. It's the same thing they wanted in a canine handler. They didn't want just a street cop. They wanted you to have all of the attributes that you need to be successful when you're out there with any given circumstance. So yes, you need to have leadership. Yes, you need to have organization, right? Yes, you need to have these different things, not just go out and be a proactive cop. There's many other things. And that all stemmed from that culture, that in-house training. But everybody was striving to be there. And in the top performers, we never got flack from any command staff. We never got flack from any of the cops that may have not been top performers. In fact, those cops that weren't top performers in proactive street level stuff were top performers in detectives, top performers in motors, top performers in SWAT. So they all had their little niche of being top performers. And once you hit the street with them, they were right there. It wasn't as if, they were quiet on the radio. There's a few of those, but everybody was looking for bad guys if they had time to do it. Some of them didn't have the qualities that maybe you would need to really be successful there and get a lot of bad people and get a lot of good, information off the street. But they were always striving to be there. It was never a competition in the sense of like, this is unfair because he gets to do this and I don't. There was none of that ever. We were all very, very close, even from like the youngest brand new cop to the salty crews. We were all super, super close, but the same. And we just may have done it at a different point in our career.
Yeah.
So
how long does it take you to become a K9 officer?
Man, I think it took me about 6 years.
Okay, so 6 years. What do people underestimate about being a K9 handler?
Everything. Man, the amount of work. You better be a dedicated person towards that specific specialty position. If you're not in it for the right reasons and you just want to walk around with a canine pin and look cool, you are never going to be successful. It is the most work intensive specialty position, I would say, for sure, without a doubt. And you're going to go through a lot of error and a lot of fucking shit up before you are even at a somewhat, doable level of like, okay, I can trust my dog. I can trust our training. I can do that. It took me a while to be, comfortable, and you're constantly learning. And, the training doesn't stop once you get out of canine school. Training is a consistent every single day thing. So the amount, you think it's a lot of work to just be a cop. It's double the work once you get that dog.
I have a whole set of questions for you then. So first of all, what separates a good canine handler from an average canine handler?
Back to that well-roundedness, right? Back to that, I want a detective, a sergeant, a street cop mixed into one as my canine handler, because the amount of responsibility that comes with that, the amount of liability that comes with that position is immense, right? So, you send your dog and it bites a civilian, right? Now you're looking at a lawsuit. Now you're looking at maybe your dog getting taken. Now you're maybe even looking at your whole unit getting shut down. So there is a ton of responsibility that's incorporated within that position. But a specific canine handler, to be successful, you have to have that proactive work ethic. You have to. Not in the sense that you're going to be proactive in the same ways, because that dog and you are for the organization, right? You're there for your teammates. You're not there for yourself. You can't be selfish anymore, but you need to have that street savviness still in that proactive realm. Because what are you doing? You're going after bad people, right? They don't call a canine handler over just to, hey, let's walk through the school and show the kids. That's not your primary role. We do that, absolutely. But like, you are there for the high stuff. You're there for the violent stuff. So I think to be successful, you absolutely need to be well-rounded. You need to be able to have good leadership skills, good communication skills, and have that street savviness to understand the street. The street's a totally different world, right? And totally different circumstances, totally different rules and everything. So being able to be savvy in that and well-rounded enough to what circumstance you have in front of you. What do you have to adapt to now, right? Just that person who possesses that well-roundedness, I think is by far the most important.
Your dog's name was Tyke. How did Tyke get his name?
So yes, my family, big law enforcement family, like I said, but we have one that is not a cop, right? My uncle. My uncle's name is Mike. When my dad was young, he couldn't say Mike, so he said Tyke. That stuck. That's his nickname. Has been ever since then. So my uncle's been in and out of prison. I could say probably his whole life. Spent about 42 years in and out, and lived that life, man. That motorcycle club life, and it was so polar opposite of all my other uncles in my family. He was kind of that black sheep, right? And so was in and out of jail all the time. But I always gravitated towards him. He was just such a great dude, family man, like just a good dude. So when he got out of prison, I think right when I became a cop, he got out of prison. He did 12 years for a bank robbery, and he gets out of prison. He's on parole. He's doing decent, right? I'm a brand new cop, and he violates parole, goes back, right? Gets a DUI, goes back for like a year and a half or something. Parole's out again. Completely changes his life, like it was a light switch, right? He went through some trial and error with drinking and doing his normal stuff, but he got his head out of his ass and put it where it needed to be. He got married. He has step grandkids now. They bought a house together. He's completely changed his life, right? So seeing that from my uncle, but not seeing it from really anybody I ever came in contact with on the street, because it's a hard thing to change your life that way, especially when you've spent 40 years doing it, and building that. And so, you're a career criminal guy, but you get out and you go, all right, enough is enough. I'm going to try to right my wrongs as best I can and live a better life. And when I got my dog, I was talking to some buddies of mine, kind of throwing out names and this and that. And it was actually one of my buddies, one of my really good buddies, Ben. He goes, dude, you need to name him Tyke for your uncle. And I'm like, you're right. Let's do it. So I named him Tyke, went up the chain, and top leadership in my police department knew who my uncle was. I mean, on one of his stints in prison he did before the last 12 years one, he paroled out and actually was in a halfway house in Daly City. So they, they knew who he was. They knew the stories behind him. And the chief was like, I want to know why you want to name him this. I'm not saying no, I'm not saying yes, but I want to know why. And so the reason I did was because of how proud I was that he changed his life. But what a great conversation to have to people, because it's a unique name. People are like, what is that? Then I get to tell them the story about how my uncle changed his life. And it brings that humility between the uniform as a cop to a civilian, right? Maybe a bad guy. And saying like, hey, no, dude, I got my uncle who's been in and out of prison. I know what that struggle's like. I know what it does to a family. I've seen it, right? And my uncle changed his life. And that's why you look at that dog right there and he's got a Daly City badge hanging from his collar and it says Tyke. So now my uncle, been in and out of prison, I send him the badge. He's like, yes, I got a badge finally, dude. And like, it's just hilarious. But it stuck, and it allowed me to have a ton of great conversations with people, man. It was great. It was great. So yeah, that's the story behind the name Tyke.
Can you remember the most intense moment you had with Tyke?
Yeah, it was our first bite. We were probably about a month on the street out of canine school. And we had a problem with somebody, an arsonist, right? They were lighting apartment complexes on fire and almost killed a couple people in this apartment complex. They were sleeping, the whole thing catches on fire, and there was just fires all around the city. So we were actively looking for who this person was. And we got some information that this individual was in this location, and our street crimes guys go out there and they see him. And he's and so Daly City, Highway 1 is on the west side of our city, right? So beautiful, man. You see the ocean. It's really, really nice on that side. And he was kind of in that area, in an area where there's a bunch of apartment complexes, again, houses. And our street crimes guys go there, and I'm working overtime with my dog, and they on-view him lighting fires, trying to light another apartment complex on fire. Actually pull up and see him, holy shit. So they take him on right there. He footbails and runs into an adjacent apartment complex. So they're calling for a dog. I'm jetting from the east side of the city over to the west, and we got a big perimeter set, all the things, and they're like, hey, he's in this apartment complex somewhere. Well, this apartment complex is massive, right? I've been on the street with my dog for like maybe 30 days. And the confidence wasn't as high as I think it was as I retired, but I'm like, hey man, this is what it's about. Let's get after it. And so I get a search team together, I get them on a long line, and we're searching this apartment complex. The canine handler who retired his dog and I took his position was there, which was awesome, right? He went right into my search team and was helping me along every which way I needed to do. Cues of the dog. Hey, do you see that? Yes, I do. Boom, he's going right. So we're searching this area. After about 45 minutes, my dog's tanked. I'm tanked. The search team's tanked. We can't find him. We're like, fuck, we have a helicopter up and he's gone, right? So we're like, dang, this sucks. And there's a lot of places that he could be hiding in this area, right? Like apartment complex, it could be anywhere. And all of a sudden a call comes into dispatch. Hey, there's a guy calling about, an individual who just climbed a tree in his front yard. I'm looking at my buddy. I go, I'm not a betting man, but that's about a block away. So we might want to go over there and check that. So he had boogied through our perimeter as we were setting it up without anybody really seeing. And so when you're on a long search like that, you got to give your dog some time to recuperate. Luckily, he had been laying in some shade. I'm giving him water. He's gassed. But I grab him, we still have the long line on. I throw him in the car. The long line I shut the door, and the long line's dragging on the road as we're driving because we're getting over there. And we pull down the street. I stop, I get out, get the dog out, and I can see him in the tree. Like it's a tree that's got like 4 branches. You know what I mean? He's like hiding behind one. I'm like, dude, oh my God. So we're giving him commands, come down, and he's got his foot dangling. And I'm like, if you're not going to come down, that's what he's going to take. So, I'm going to give you one more chance, give my announcements. He drops down. I'm like, all right, cool. The dog's right in front of me. Bark, bark, bark. The guy sees the dog, obviously. So he acts like, hey, all right, I'm good, right? Prones out, gets on the ground. Soon as my partner touches his arm, fights on. He turns, tries to fight, tries to flee. And so I do a placement bite. I grab my dog, boom, right on his, I think I got him like upper hip. And first time in a bite, first time in a real physical altercation with my dog. So my dog is sitting there biting this dude. I'm telling him, hey, put your hands behind your back, put your hands behind your back. I have one of my partners right here, like on top of my dog, with his hands right next to my dog. And all I'm thinking is like, dude, please don't let go and bite him. Please don't let go. and I have my sergeant fighting him on the other side. And he's super, so we're like on each other, right? And the dog is right there getting after it. And so bad guy finally is like, okay, I've had enough of this. As soon as the handcuffs come on, I pop the dog off. But that definitely was the most stressful incident I had with that dog. And I had, I did the other one that's a close, in fact, this one might have been actually the one I should have told you is my most stressful, but there's a lot of them, man. I mean, as a canine handler, everybody doesn't want to talk about the biting of your partners. I got 2 of those. And if you include me, there's many more, but, so SFPD calls one day saying they had a residential burglary, cops show up, bad guys come running out of the house, and one of them takes a shot at the cops who are arriving. So they set up a huge perimeter, the bad guys take off running, and they're calling for a dog. SF didn't have a dog on duty or whatever, so we're obviously the closest one there. I get one of my SWAT guys in the car with me, and we're shredding to SF where this location is. And we get there, and because what they were calling for was a SWAT certified dog. And again, I had just gotten back from SWAT school with my dog. And it's like day 2, man. And I'm like, can I just get like a month of trying to work this stuff out? And so I'm like, well, he's skids trained, so let's go, man. So we rip over there, and there's a sea of patrol cars, man. You go to any big incident in SF, man, you're getting bodies. There's so many cops, and there's a huge circle, and it's their full-time SWAT team, right? And these are the dudes that like, you don't see them ever unless there's a SWAT hit that's happening. They don't do anything other than all hostage stuff, high priority, calls. And so they're the major leagues, right, to a street cop. I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh shit, this is their full-time team. Like this is a big deal. So I come walking up with my dog, right? And they're like, you the handler? I'm like, well, yeah, cool, go with them. And I'm like, okay, no prep for nothing? Cool. So I'm walking with the team, and they're kind of briefing me on what they need. Well, they have an entire block shut down, and there's house. We're like, yeah, we're going to go yard to yard. We need to search all of these backyards, side yards, front yards, everything with the dog and our team. This is the first time my dog is in a real life scenario with a team, an actual SWAT team that's going. And this SWAT team's never worked with my dog. I've never even been to SWAT training yet to integrate my dog into our own team, let alone, anything close to this. So we get to the first house, and they're like, all right, you tell us what we need to do. I'm like, okay. Like, fuck, I don't know, man. So we go into this garage, and every house in SF, man, straight up, right? I mean, it's like almost like a skyscraper type of house. It's like tri-leveled, and so everything's real narrow. And I can remember we're walking through this garage, and the team is like right beside me. My dog's hot because he knows we're obviously working. We're not in the car, and we're not training. So I'm very like, don't bite one of these dudes, man. You just turn on me if you have to. You know what I mean? Like, please don't bite one of these dudes. Well, we get after it. We start searching. He does a full yard-to-yard search. We get to the last house, and he's working great with this team. I'm like, I'm impressed with him, but I'm trying to stay vigilant on what I need to do. But I'm like, this is some cool shit, man. I remember, and I had him on a long line because I was like, you know what? I'm not going to put him in a situation where I know there's a high likelihood of him failing, right? So I would have loved, and probably the better way of doing it would have been off leash and just using an e-collar. Well, we weren't there yet. So he's on a long line. He's getting kind of tangled up in shit in the backyard. And there's this retaining wall, but there's like a 4-foot drop on the other side. His dumbass had jumped up on there and kind of fell into the retaining wall, or on the other side of the retaining wall, pinned himself like between a fence and the retaining wall. And this SWAT operator's got his gun towards this shed, and he kind of walks up, doesn't even look at the dog, grabs the dog's harness and picks him up and just puts him right down on the ground, and he goes back to searching. And I'm like, holy fuck, like shit, that was awesome. So we get to the last house, and it's been a grind, man. I'm like, I'm done at this point. I'm like, please make this go. I'm over it. So we get to the last house, and there's this big shed type outer building to the left side of this home, but there's no fence to the street. So there's cops walking everywhere on the front sidewalk, and media that's showing up right here. And I'm like, oh gosh. So we search the backyard, and we get to this shed, and the shed was up off the ground a little bit, so you could see kind of underneath the shed. And the SWAT operator bends down like this. Well, he's right next to my dog. My dog turns and puts his teeth on a flashbang that he had right here on his vest. And I'm looking at this, and I'm like, oh my, grab him. I'm like, dude, if this dumbass has some pin stuck in this is so fucked. So I grab, hey, no, right? Back to searching. He goes back to searching, and the operator turns to me and goes, dude, did he just bite my vest? I'm like, no, dude, we're fine. And we just kept going. And at the end, I told him, I'm like, dude, my dog fully put his teeth on your fucking flashbang you had right there. And he was like, damn, bro, that was fucking crazy. But we worked so well with them, and it was such a good experience for me, but it was so stressful just because of the environment. You had a bad guy who possibly could have been in the backyards with a gun, who had already taken a shot at a cop. I'm in a real world search scenario with a full-time SWAT team that I have no idea who they are. So very intense, very stressful. But at the end, they loved my dog. They were like, dude, this was awesome. We want to integrate a dog into our SWAT team. So they actually invited us to go train with them at their SWAT deal. And it just turned into a great thing. But that was a little more stressful than the placement bite on that bad guy. I'll definitely say that.
All right, let's walk me through your first critical incident in 2018, and how did that affect you?
Yeah, so we had obviously multiple people in our city that were repeat offender type individuals that we would deal with on a consistent basis. This particular individual had he had a restraining order against him to his parents' house, and he had lived there for years and years and years. But hooked on meth, right? He had been going through issues, so his parents kicked him out and said, hey, you're not welcome here. Every time he would come back to the house, they would call 911, we would show up and handle it. But I think it was like a 3 or 4 cop minimum call. We had it like in our in-house database. When that specific address would pop up on your computer, it would say like minimum 3 cop, because he was a violent dude. He, it wasn't a very big guy, but was always high. And always wanted to fight. So me and 2 other cops, we roll over there. They're calling 911 saying he's here. He's trying to fight us. He's destroying the house. Like, please get here. So we're code 3 rolling that way. We get there, get out. We start walking up the steps to the living room, which was on the 2nd story. And as we opened the door, we could see, I want to say it was his dad or his uncle, is like laying on top of him, holding him down in the hallway. And there's shit everywhere, like he had just gone nuts and broke everything type thing. Well, when we got there, we walked through the door, the uncle stands up and goes, okay, the police is here, which totally fine. Well, he pops up, right? He's like, no one's on me anymore. So he pops up and the fight's on. So we go to detain him and we start fighting. He starts pulling and punching and all sorts of stuff. So it took my 2 partners and me holding on to this dude, and he was pushing us around this room. Like, we were in the craziest part and nastiest part was there was a gallon of milk on the mantle above the fireplace and where the TV was, and that milk fell as we were fighting him. So now there's a gallon of milk all over the hardwood floors. We're slipping in milk, and it was just nasty. And this dude hadn't had a shower in about a month, so it was like that. And so we all slip and fall on the ground, and we're fighting him. And it just is not going anywhere. So I get 1 handcuff on him, and my buddy pulls his taser out and tases him in the back. And he stops fighting. We're like, okay, cool. That did its job. Click, right? And I remember looking at him, and I'm like, well, something's off, right? Flip him over. He's not breathing. And I'm like, oh, shit. We take handcuffs on him, start giving him medical aid. We're calling code 3 for medics. And they show up, they're working on him. They end up transporting him. When they transported him, he ended up passing away. So excited delirium. He was on like a 2-week bender off of crystal, and that, you know, once you tase them and they're in that heightened state, one, they're, I mean, strong as shit, right? They don't feel pain like we do, which is obvious from the knockout drag out fight we were having with him. But that tasing is what ended up, you know, contributing to his death. And so it was an in custody death. And it was my it was my first incident to where I was like, okay, someone has lost their life because of actions of myself and us as the police, right? Mm-hmm. We had shootings and OISs and, you know, that type of thing, but it was never as personal to me in that way because I wasn't involved in any of it. Obviously it was super personal because those are my friends and all of that, but I hadn't been involved in anything like that yet. And what came after that is really what I think affected me more than the actual fight that had occurred. It was, you know, we get separated, we go through our interviews, we get put on admin leave. But I remember going home, going to sleep, wake up in the morning, and there his face is on the news, and they're interviewing the family who had just called us the night before, and they're saying that we killed him and we shouldn't have done what we did, and it's our fault, and basically calling us murderers, and actually using that language as time went on. And then social media started, and now there's my face calling me a murderer and all the other people that were involved. And then there was a small protest that happened, and all of those things compounded, and you're like, so now I go through this and I'm gonna have to work in this area for the next 25 years, right? And how is that gonna be? How is the relationship, you know, if I'm on a stop in front of their house, totally unassociated to them, am I gonna get, you know, flack from them? Am I gonna have to deal with, you know, that thought process of like, how is this gonna affect me later on? As far as actually trying to do my job. But the media, the seeing your face on the news and seeing it in a setting like on Instagram where they're calling you a murderer, I took offense to it, man, because that's not how it happened. You know, you called us because you guys were in fear because this dude has done physical stuff to you guys before. It's why you have this restraining order. And to hear them the next day basically say that, you know, we shouldn't have done what we did. We killed him. Those were like the exact words I think the mom used, who was the reporting party the night before. And, you know, in reality, that really gave me my understanding of what this is going to be, right? And that was 2018. I was like a 4-year cop at that point. And when we talk about the downward spiral from, you know, the George Floyd and how it changed from the beginning of my career, I could see that this was part of that. Right? It felt like it was the same terminology. They were up there with their attorney in front of the cameras, and it was the same thing you would see in all these incidents. And I'm like, it made it here, right? Like, obviously people are going to be upset when bad things like that happen, when their family members pass away, they get shot and killed, whatever. There's going to obviously be a lot of emotion involved in that. And, you know, we're not sitting there happy about any of this stuff, right? So seeing it in the media and seeing how it was getting spun and sent out there and taken as fact for me was like the first time where I'm like, okay, things are different for real now. Yes, I had protests. Yes, I went through all of that, but it hadn't really reached that significant level in Daly City specifically, right? Like people's relationship between us changed for sure, right? They had that immediate, we don't like you because you're the police because of what we've seen, right? They had that for sure, but not to that extent where they're standing in front of cameras with their attorney and basically lying or overindulging certain facts to kind of spin it in their way. That was really the first time, but how it affected me was, you know, personally, I was like, fuck, man, I wish it didn't end up like that. I mean, that definitely is not something I wanted to get into this career field for. But I understood it better than I understood the OIS I was involved in, just because I'm like, unfortunately, this is part of the job. You know, these bad things do happen. We do our best to mitigate them, but it affected me in the way of like, man, now my face is out there in the open with this word murderer on it, right? And now I had this feeling when I was working that everybody was looking at me because they had seen that, which is totally false, right? The likelihood of everybody seeing that was very slim. But it just felt that way, right? And I had that, I like harbored that feeling of like, fuck, dude, there's someone out to get me almost, because of they're calling me a murderer when I'm not. Yeah. So that's where I think the mental health side of my career, I think that's where it became realer than it ever was, for sure.
Do you think you had incidents, obviously, do you think you had incidents prior to that were kind of built on top of that to there?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
For sure. This was like the most plain as day one that I was like, okay, this is different. But I absolutely had been through things that had affected me, whether that be, physical altercations or seeing an unfortunate circumstance, dead kids. Like there was a lot of that, right? A lot of fast pursuits that ended up in really bad crashes and seeing accidents. People don't understand. I mean, that was an eye-opening experience alone, getting into law enforcement, seeing what happens to human bodies when vehicles are involved, right? So like all of that stuff compounded into that and then just continued as my career went on, for sure.
Okay, well, let's talk about, since you brought it up, let's talk about your officer-involved shooting in 2021. What happened?
Yeah, so it was a Wednesday. It was a canine training day. We had our maintenance days on Wednesdays. So I'd always get to, the department early so I could do a little training with the dog before we go to briefing, because as soon as I cut out of briefing, I only had about an hour before I had to go a city down to go do training. So we cleared briefing. I go to our corp yard. I fill my car up with some fuel, let my dog out. I remember eating a little snack, and I'm like, all right, cool. Let's go get a hook before we have to go to canine training, because when we get back, it's going to be like, 7, 8 o'clock at night. I'm not going to have as much time to go out and find a bad guy. And so I leave the corp yard the same way that I've, left many, many times. And they were doing a road construction, like a slurry seal. They're putting patching up holes and all that crap. So there was a ton of cones and traffic, going as soon as I got out of that corp yard. So I figured I'm going to turn right and go around all this stuff so I can get up to Mission Street and start hunting around. And I turned right on Niantic Street, and I see this, there's a white 4-door Chevy truck, and it was parked kind of cattywampus, It had a flat tire. It was just out of place. Toolbox was up. The driver's door was kind of opened. It was open about that much. It looked out of place. This road we go on almost daily because that's where our corp yard is. So we're very familiar with who lives there, and there's some bad guys there that we deal with on a constant basis, but we were familiar with that area. And I remember looking at this truck just going, that just does not seem right to me. And as I passed it, I could see through the open door, there was a white male, and he was like kind of slumped like this, near the steering wheel. So I drive by it and I catch that out of the corner of my eye. I go to the end of the street and I'm like, fuck, I got to check on him. I see the flat tire. What if he's drunk and now he's fallen asleep, or he's having a medical emergency? So I turn around. Now I'm coming back the opposite direction, and I'm running his plate from the front of the truck. As I drive by, I could see the door kind of shut a little bit more. As I ran the plate, came back as a recent recovered stolen vehicle out of SF. And the area where they recovered it, obviously, is not a good area. Wasn't something that concerned me too much. I just, kept it on my mind, like, hey, this thing was stolen like a week ago and recovered very recently. So just keep it on your mind. So I pass the truck, flip around, get behind it. As soon as I go to put it out on the air to tell, dispatch, hey, this is where I'm at and this is what I'm doing, there was someone in FTO, and they were running out someone's name, and it was like the slowest, David, John. I'm like, fuck, why does this happen every time I got to do something, right? So in that circumstance, right, as a street cop, you have to make a decision, right? And I'm not advocating for getting out of your car and taking people on without telling people where you are. But that's what I did. I went, all right, I'm going to put this out when I can. I'm confident in my abilities. I'm confident in myself, right? I'm listening to my radio. As soon as I get a break, I'm going to put it out, even if I'm standing in front of dude. So I walk up to the car. I kind of just crack the door like this. I go, hey, and he turns immediately and goes, hello, officer. Like, just very bubbly. I'm like, holy shit. Like, I wasn't expecting that, right? And I go, hey, man, I passed your truck here and I saw you kind of slumped over. I wanted to come and check on you, right? Are you having a medical emergency? Are you all right? He's like, oh, no, I'm totally fine. Totally fine. I can see his carotid artery just boom, boom, out of his neck. And I'm like, okay. So I look and I see a front right passenger and there's a female in the back seat. Front right passenger had blue latex gloves on. And he was doing this, and he was like super nervous, and he's sweating like crazy, and he's moving his hands like this, and he's rocking back and forth. And I'm paying attention to him, but I'm still trying to talk to this driver just to get myself some time so I can put it out on the air. Talking about really nothing, just like, hey, okay, cool. What your truck is this, man? Like, where are you from? Like, just anything I could to kind of just get the ball rolling down the road a little bit. And as I was talking to him, I then look at the passenger again, and he's still doing this with his hands, but he's got a meth pipe that I can see popping out of his hand, and he's got it kind of trying to hide it with his right hand. And I go, hey, man, I see the pipe. Like, if that's why you're nervous, like, bro, this is California. I mean, I'd fucking give it back to you. You know what I mean? Like, it's insane. So don't trip off that. We, you know, as a cop, you live in the world of discretion. Right? Felonies, no. But if it's misdemeanor stuff, we can work things out, right? And you're able to do that. So I told him, like, look, man, if that's what you got and you got a little baggie of dope, no problem. As long as you are cool with me, I'm going to absolutely be cool with you. I'm not here to fuck your life up, okay? I'm here to do a job, and I obviously see that, but we can work around that. He didn't say nothing to me. Just, and he started breathing. And I'm like, okay, that's different. It was at that point I was like, hair on the back of my neck, that gut feeling of like, there's more to this than what I think. Basically, like, just keep your game tight. You know, something is probably coming. And it was at that time that I heard these squeaky ass brakes, man, behind me. I immediately knew, I'm like, that's a patrol car for sure, because that was every single one of ours. And I kind of give like a real quick look. Obviously it was one of ours. I didn't even look, but I went like this to say like, hey, stay with me. So that officer stops, gets out of the car, and is now right beside me. So I go, hey, I'm going to put this out, stand here, right? Like, so she took over my position. I kind of went to the back of the truck to get the plate, and I put it out. So now everybody knows where we are. So I'm like, cool. So then I go back to my position where I was at in that open driver's door, and I start, hey, what's your name? Right? And they're like basically sounding out their name to me. You know what I mean? Oh, it's not CC, it's CT. I'm like, oh, okay. And I'm acting like, oh yeah, everybody does that. What's your birthday? You know what I mean? Like, it's like deer in a headlight. My birthday is, I'm like sitting there looking at, oh, okay, yeah, no worries, man. Okay, cool. Knowing 100% that this is all bullshit. And so it was at that time that two of my other buddies show up, right? So they had been on a robbery detail doing something, and they heard me going to stop, and they were close by, so they just came over. So now the both of them are on the passenger side of the truck, me and this officer on the open driver's door. And so I start asking the passenger the same thing. What's your name? This, that, and the other. And he did the same exact thing. I said, okay, I got enough people here. Now we transition, right? Now we transition to, you're getting out of the car, driver. What? Why? You get out of the car. Boom. So he's out of the car, put his hands behind his back, and I'm holding his hands, and I'm now canting him to walk him towards the back of the truck to the hood of my car so I can do a pat search. And since I have so many officers, I'm not going to do it right there, right? So I get to about mid truck bed where the rear tire is, and the officer that was standing at the open driver's door goes, Nick, his hands. And I look, and it just was odd to me. And so I wasn't going to let bad guy number one go because he hadn't been searched. So I walked back to the open driver's door with him. I'm kind of, pushing him along, and I poke my head in, and that front right passenger had a black handgun in his right hand, and it was sitting on his right thigh. And he's just looking straight at me. And I'm like, oh shit, like you didn't have that before. So I go, shit, let bad guy number one go, because I'm like, I got to handle this instead of dealing with him. So I let him go. I'm pulling my gun out and I'm yelling, gun, 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 right? My partners on this side of the truck had the rear door open, but the windows on this truck were super tinted. Like it was almost like it was like spray painted black tint. So I'm yelling, gun, gun, gun. They now know I'm talking about this dude because they can see the female on the back, right? So they open the passenger side door and they're coming through the passenger side with like their hands like this to grab him. At about the time I get probably mid draw, he lets out this like roar, rah, and pulls the gun over the center console and points it straight at my face. And I'm looking down the barrel of his gun, and through him, I can see both my buddies, coming through the front passenger door. And so, and in that moment, you have to make a decision. And I made the decision not to pull the trigger because of my backdrop, right? My partners are there. And that's not what I'm going to do. So it was at that moment that I made that decision. So did bad guy. He pulled the trigger on his gun and shot me like dead X in the forehead. And it was bizarre, right? No gunshot. I knew I'd been shot with something. I felt it. I'm like, fuck. I'm trying to orient myself. I still have my motor functions. I'm like, something happened. And so I kind of take a few steps towards the bed of the truck. And I remember the female just freaking blows the door open and takes off running. I put my hand on the bed rail of the truck and I could feel it rocking back and forth. And it snapped me out of whatever I was in. Because I knew those two cops that are my buddies, man, they're in that fight. I know this dude's got a gun. Obviously, I just stared down the barrel of it, right? So I then walk around the truck to the passenger side, and what I see is, and our front right passenger, man, was huge. I mean, he's a big, big dude. And I could see his arm out of the open driver's door with the gun and his hand moving down like this, and one of my partners holding his hand in the gun, moving his head back and forth, trying to get it away from the barrel of the gun. The other partner of mine I could see him inside the truck, so I could only see like the bottom half of his body. So I knew he was in there, and I could see he had his gun out, but they were so on top of each other. In his brain, I think he thought I was still over there. So he was thinking similar backdrop situations. So he's trying to get good placement to get a shot off on this guy. As I come up, I put my left hand on that specific cop's shoulder. And my thought process was like, I'm just going to come up over the top of you and shoot him. And it was at the time I put my hand on his shoulder, I heard two shots, boom, boom. And I'm like, is this bad guy shooting my buddy? Is this us shooting him? So at that time, the cop that was fighting with this gun, he had ripped it out of the bad guy's hand and kind of walked towards the front of the car while me and that other cop ripped bad guy out of the car and put him on the ground. And I could hear that cop going, it's a fucking pellet gun. It's a fucking pellet gun. And it was at that moment, I'm like, dude, this dude just shot me dead X with a pellet gun, right? And there was some comfort there because I was like, at least it's not, an actual round that rode the top of my head, exited out or something along those lines. And I'm like, okay, we're going to table this and we'll deal with that shit later. We need to give this dude medical aid. So we're doing our best. We have our medical kit out, and there's no through and through round. So it obviously didn't exit.
Who shot him?
The cop who was in the truck.
Okay.
And he had shot him almost like point blank, like gun up against guy's torso. And that literally was all the body he even had to pull a shot off. And so, paramedics get there, they grab him, transport him. When he gets to the hospital, he ends up dying. And then we get separated, we get interviewed, right? The whole same thing with the 2018 deal. But since George Floyd had just been, that whole thing had just happened. I mean, I think it was maybe a month or two, maybe a couple months. I'm not 100% sure, but it was relatively recent. And the suspect was African-American, and we were all white. And that narrative got spun tremendously. Now we go through our interviewing process, and now the news is 10 times what it was for that in custody death. Right now, they're trying to figure out who we are. We're trying to figure out where we live. There's all sorts of things going on within about 24 hours to 48 hours after that shooting. And so, that incident definitely changed me as a person. Just from the specifics of me making that decision not to shoot, right? And having an afterthought of like, how dare I, not give up, but how dare I make that decision when I know I got my wife at home. I had a 2-year-old son, and then my daughter was like 5 months old. And I had this feeling of like, how the fuck did you just easily go, I'm not going to shoot my buddies, man. That's not happening. So whatever happens, happens. Like, how could you come from that place, right? Like, you have all this love at home waiting for you, but you are so in depth in your career and what you do that because I'm telling you, I made that decision and was good with it. I made the decision not to shoot. I knew what the repercussions of that would be. So
okay, but wait a minute. I'm struggling to understand why you're struggling with this, because you see the backdrop. You don't want to shoot your two buddies, right? I mean, they're clearly in your field of fire.
Right.
Why does that? Why do you struggle with that?
Yeah, I think it's because for me, remembering it feels like I stared down the barrel of that gun for a long time. You know what I mean? Like, I had enough time. I had enough time to make a decision, maybe camp my body in a different position, to have a backdrop that might have been that way or this way, right? And you Monday morning quarterback that stuff all the time, which is normal, right? Mm-hmm. But to me, in that moment, when I talk about slowing things down, I feel like that was one of my biggest things that I could do. I was prideful on it. I had the ability to slow things down, make the decision, and come out unscathed and do the right thing and be reasonable, all within the same thing. And in this setting, for whatever reason, it didn't feel like that to me. It felt like I was staring down the barrel of this gun for too long, and maybe thought about what I was going to do for too long. And that's why it ended up the way that it did. And I know now that that's not the case, right? I don't struggle with that like I did, really honestly, for a couple years after that.
Do you think that you were put on leave for like 4 months, right?
Yeah, so we initially were put on leave for a week, right? And once we were coming back, because I take that back for the 48 hours, it took about a week for media and all the uproar to really hit. So I actually suited up on the next Wednesday, left at the same time, went back down in uniform. And I remember driving over the Golden Gate Bridge, and I'm like sweating. I'm going back to work right now. Holy shit. Like, I knew I wasn't right, but I was like, I'm fine. You know what I mean? I'm going to do it. So we go back to work. I park in the parking lot. I'm training my dog a little bit, and I could feel myself like, I shouldn't be here, man. Like this, I need some time. You know what I mean? But again, it's kind of that old school mindset that needs to change of like, I'm going to suck this shit up because these dudes before me did, right? I'm not going to sit here and be like, I need to go home because I don't feel good type of shit, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm sitting in my car waiting for briefing, and I got the AC blowing, and if you know anything about Daly City, it ain't hot there, right? They call it Fog City because like there's times in the broad day you can't see your hand in front of your face. There's so much fog. And so I got the AC blaring because I'm sweating. And I see my lieutenant come walking towards me, and I'm like, oh shit. So I get out, give him a hug, right? This is the first time we've seen each other since that incident. And he pulls me aside. He's like, hey, listen, I just talked to command staff, and we're sending you guys home. And I was like, I melted in my chair. I'm like, okay, great. In my mind, I was like, fuck, thank you, right? But I'm like, why? Like, what's going on? They're like, well, because of now the media attention that this is getting, we don't want you guys out on the street, right? For obvious reasons. So I dressed down, and then he goes, we're going to put you on admin leave indefinitely for now until we figure out when's a good time to bring you back. And I remember I'm driving home that same day, I'm just crossing the Golden Gate Bridge. I'm coming up to this tunnel. I get a call from one of my captains, and he's like, "Hey, we're calling you because we're wondering if you are okay with us." I want to say it was the FBI, but it was some computer-based thing that they could pay for to wipe our names, everything off the internet type deal, all our pictures, everything. And I'm like, I'd never heard of that before. Like, I was like, why do you need to do that shit? Right. They're like, well, we're concerned with people trying to figure out where you live, like this and that. We don't have any hard information on that. So don't take it as a straight fact, but there is, potential of that. So that's why we want to get this shit off the internet for you. I'm like, fucking do it. Right. So then I get home and my agency called the local agency where I lived and requested passing checks and cops that would, park on my street and wait overnight, you know what I mean? And just keep an eye on our home. So, you talk about it obviously was real to me from the beginning, but hearing him ask me if that's what I wanted for those specific reasons, it was another one of those like, holy shit, the reality of that is so much different than what I thought it would be. What it was. It was like, wow, this is real. Potentially there could be someone coming to my house and trying to do bad things to me and my family. So it was another add-on to the stress that was already there from the actual incident.
Do you think being on leave for that long hurt the situation, made it worse?
I don't. From my perspective, I certainly don't, because that's when I utilized the time to go to treatment, get a psychologist, and really work on the issues that I was having. Mm-hmm. But I honestly think it was for the best to not have us out there continuing to be proactive, continuing to be on calls, right? Because at that time, there was a lot of community members who knew our names. They had photos of us. They knew what they were looking for, essentially. And they didn't really, they didn't want us to be on a call and all of a sudden, there's a crowd forming outside type deal.
Yeah, so it wasn't a matter of you being on leave and them and you thinking in your mind, shit, did I do something wrong?
No, not at all. Okay. Not at all. There was none of that. Because, at that time, it was so recent. I knew exactly what I did, and I knew exactly the reasons why I did it. I knew what everybody else did. I knew there was no conversation to be had about things that we did wrong in those moments. So I was confident on that. And it wasn't from the department. When the department sent us, they were like, hey, I know how this looks. We know what it sounds like to be put on admin leave, right? It is not that. We want you safe. We don't want you in another situation where shit can go bad real quick. You think about it, you're on a traffic stop by yourself, right? And now there's 30 people around you. You're calling for code 3 cover. A ton of bad shit can happen because people make bad decisions and cops react to those bad decisions. And so they didn't want to compound, right, incidents on top of us. And so it was awesome for all of us, honestly. We all talked and we were like, dude, this is the best thing we could do. Just to kind of stay out of the city, right? Yeah. Stay out of the view of everybody, just to let things cool down until the information can come out and people can understand why things were done the way they were.
When did you realize you're like, I can't go back to work?
So it was about 6 months into treatment that my psychologist and I had that conversation, right? And it was easy for me because he told me I'm not going back. It wasn't a decision that I made, which was honestly good, because looking back on it, I probably would have been like, I can deal with it, man. It's, fuck it, let's go.
What was it that he saw that you were like, that he said?
I think what it was the, through EMDR and everything that we were doing.
And EMDR is what?
It's a treatment for PTSD. It could be sound, it can be visual. We did all sorts of different things. And at that time it was still COVID too. So it was super difficult for me to, really be, I never really was in an office with him. It was all done via Zoom and so that transition, it was difficult in that way for sure. But I think what he saw, what he told me was that, because I had this feeling of I've spent my 9 lives, right? I had been in an incident, a couple different ones where it was real close. Fighting people with guns, trying to pull them out and shoot me. I had a lot of that type of street level work that had turned violent that I had been kind of struggling with, but I didn't say anything about it, right? So it was this shooting, but it was like 7 different incidents before the shooting that I was working through just to get to the shooting. And I told him this feeling's not going away. Like this feeling of, if I go back, I'm not going to be as lucky, right? Like the percentage of someone actually pulling a gun on you, pointing it at you, pulling the trigger, and it being a CO2 pellet gun, it can't be very high, right? Like I felt like next time that's going to be a real bullet. I don't know how it wasn't. I think bad guy bought the gun on the street and thought it was real. But I had that inherent, like, dude, the hypervigilance for me was insane. Like I'd go to the gas station and I would have to calm myself down by counting the lug nuts on people's tires just to get out to pump freaking gas. And I was telling him this, like, what is this? And he's like, well, it's anxiety, right? And it's your depression. I'm like, I don't have fucking depression. I'm not depressed. He's like, well, those two things go side by side, man. And yes, you do. And so once we started, he basically was like, look, I don't think this is going to get better for you in the sense of, let's put you back in a uniform. I think getting you back in uniform, doing this same job, we could be great, right? This treatment could work great. And then the minute you step foot back in that police department and the minute you start going back to your jobs, you're going to have more incidents. And the way he put it to me is he's like, your bucket's full and you can't afford to have really anymore.
Do you think he was right?
100%. 100%. My dad used an analogy for me, and he learned it in the National Academy. And he's like, because you always hear the when your glass is full, right, and it'll pour over type thing. For me, this one stuck more. It was the backpack. He's like, every single incident you have is a rock. You're wearing a backpack and you're putting your rocks, your incidents, in your backpack, right? And when it gets too full, you being the type of cop you are, you're just shoving them in there, trying to make them fit. Well, the bottom of that backpack's going to rip sooner or later, and all your rocks are going to fall out, right? Trying to pick those rocks up again is going to be twice as hard. And that's really how I felt, right? I was like, I'm tapped out to the point emotionally that I don't know if I can deal with another one of these, right? Like, I don't know. There's no more room in this backpack. It's out. It's ripped. I'm fucking walking all over the place picking these rocks up, right? So I think, getting into law enforcement when I did, being raised in law enforcement the way I was, but not having any foundation built for anything through mental health at all. I mean, I don't even remember a conversation ever about mental health other than in the police academy. This is how you put people on 5150 holds. This is how you evaluate them. This is why they're doing this. But it was a snippet, move on. But there was nothing directed towards, hey, there's potential for you to have trauma in this job that you're going to keep and is going to affect you in your life. There was no talks of that. I never had any kind of preparation for that. And I think I worked so freaking hard and had so much passion in that motivation for the patch I was wearing that I found myself in a few different things, man, and that I just sidestepped them and moved on because I was so inundated with what I was doing. I was so passionate about it and so happy that I was there. I never dealt with anything that I struggled with, knowing that I was struggling with them. Right? When I fought that dude, I fought a guy with a gun and he was trying to pull it out and shoot me and all the things. After that, I had a conversation with him as I drove him back to the station. And I told this on a different podcast, and he didn't call me, he didn't ask if I was a young cop. So he's in the back. We had just gone through this, ordeal where I literally had my gun to his temple and I'm looking him in the eyes and I told him point blank, if you don't get your hand off the gun, I'm blowing your brains out. That's literally what I told him. And he's in the back of my car and we're driving back to the station and he's looking at me through the rearview mirror. And he goes, you're one of those young caribou, aren't you? And I'm like, what? He's like, you're a new cop, aren't you? I'm like, well, I ain't that new. Like, but yeah, I am. He goes, were you going to shoot me? And I go, yeah, I was. He goes, good, because I was going to shoot you too. And I'm like, all right. And we kept driving, super cordial with me the entire time. We get back to the station. I'm searching him. He's laughing and joking with me like it was nothing. And it wasn't until someone else transported him to jail and I go back, in service on the street, and I'm sitting in my car and I'm like, that was real. That wasn't him talking shit. That wasn't him trying to be cool or any of those things. That was him being 100% forward with me, letting me know what was going to happen. And had I not acted the way that I did, that would have happened. And so it clicks you into this reality of like, man, we need to take this job seriously because it is a serious job. Things like that happen right now as you and I are having this conversation. And if you're not prepared for that, both physically in what you're doing and what you're handling, but if you're not prepared for the aftermath of what that is going to cause, whether that be immediately after or when you retire, sooner or later, that's going to come back up and you're going to have to face it. You're going to have to get good with it at some point. And there's some people out there, man, who don't have any of it, right? They have the ability to take that stuff in, boom, outlet it out, and they push forward. And
I know,
and it's amazing.
I'm trying to explore that topic a little bit more because when your episode airs, 2 episodes before yours is a guy who went through the exact same thing, except that he actually got shot like 3 times.
Jesus.
And so yeah, same thing. But it's like, and you never know because I read these comments and you got a little about it. Keyboard warriors out there, and I don't know if they're legit cops or whatever else, but you got a lot of guys going, you guys are a bunch of pussies, you just suck 100%. It up, and I'm like, it doesn't really work that way, though.
100%. Now, I was very fortunate with the cops I surrounded myself with, right? There was never any of that. There's never any of like, dude, you're a fucking pussy. Like what? I'm a retired, special forces guy, and I've done 10 deployments in Afghanistan, and now I'm here as a cop, and I'm still rolling, right? I've been shot numerous times. All of these things. There was never any of that for me. There was nothing but support, which was great. But you talk about the computer stuff, right? I did a podcast right when I retired. And the keyboard warrior stuff killed me, right? I was reading the comments, trying to type back, and I finally was like, dude, you know what? Just let them have whatever it is that they want to say, man. Right. You want to call me a pussy? Totally fine, dude. I'm good. I know that I'm not. Yeah. So, you know what I mean? We're fine. But there is a lot of that, and that's what prevents people, especially in law enforcement, and I would imagine the military as well, and fire and EMS and everything else. But that's the main reason why people don't seek help. They don't go, hey, and it doesn't have to be like, I need 6 months off, right? Like, it doesn't have to be that way. It has to be go into a sergeant. Hey, look, I'm not right. I need to go talk to somebody. Can I just have that time that I need? Whether that be 6 months, whether it be 2 weeks, whatever. They shouldn't even ask that, right? And you should have a sergeant who, is good in that setting. Doesn't make them feel like, what? Dude, we only have 5 bodies today, dude. Like, you want to leave? Like, you start pushing back like that dude's never going to say anything ever again. So, law enforcement absolutely can do a better job of that. And I think we're getting there. I think there's definitely motivation in the mental health realm when it comes to law enforcement. I think there's a lot of agencies who are setting up, kind of buddy systems that they can go to and talk to and get help. But it's that stigma, man. It's a rough deal, especially when you have worked so hard to get the reputation that you have, and the reputation that you have is not that, right? It's not being vulnerable. It's not saying, hey, these things are affecting me, right? You're the guy who can go in there, see the worst of the worst, come out and keep going. Right. And when you're that type, and then now you have to say, hey, I'm struggling. This is what I'm doing now. Right. There is like an eyebrow raise, like, holy shit, we didn't know you were dealing with this, man. Right. There's that. But I was fortunate that I didn't have any, pushback as far as disrespectful pushback or making me feel lesser, so.
Well, let's talk about what you're doing now. Tell me about the Code 33 project.
Yeah.
What does, for the civilians out there, what does Code 33 mean?
Yeah, so Code 33 is a code. I think it's just a California code, but Code 33 is emergency traffic, right? So if you need the air, you put out Code 33. They put a tone out on the radio. No one else is to talk on the radio. It's just you and your dispatch. So if you get behind a stolen car, or you're in a fight or something that you need the radio, you yell out Code 33. Or not yell out, but you say Code 33 because you have emergency traffic and you need priority.
Okay. So what is it and why did you start it?
So the Code 33 project is a law enforcement mentorship program. We are motivated in mentoring the next generation of law enforcement to prepare them for the realities of law enforcement in an honest way, right? Trying to prepare yourself for law enforcement is a really hard thing. Not everybody has a cop they can go to and trust to give them the truth of what the job is, right? You may have a neighbor, he's going to give you good information, she's going to give you good information, but it's not going to be the reality, right? The real gritty knit of what this job is. And focusing on this next generation's passion. What is your why? Like, why do you want to be a cop? Once we've established that, we just build off that why. I want to help people is what you hear. Like I told you before. When I hear that, I don't take that as an answer. I go, well, how are you going to help people? Right? Everybody, that's the easiest, answer that you're going to get on an oral board. And in my case, I said, well, I'm going to proactively find bad guys to help my community, right? And so that's the example of that. But it's help preparing for an oral board. Those are unlike any other interview you're going to take, right? Prepare you for the background process. Prepare you for the police academy, for FTO, and for solo beat life, like what your job is going to be as a solo cop. And really the preparedness is honing in on that well-roundedness, right? I want thinkers. I don't want people making decisions off of emotions. I want you to be better in the moment in that way. And the way we build that is well-roundedness, right? The ability to adapt is probably the most important aspect of law enforcement. You're never going to really go to the same exact call. It may be the same code, it may be even the same people, but the circumstances are going to be different in every one. And molding yourself, preparing yourself for that, so that when you're there, you can go to the documented gang member who's chirping and a bad guy, right? And you can navigate and communicate with that individual the way you need to, which may not be the most professional thing in some eyes, right? But in that setting, criminals, that they only understand it one way, right? And you may have to tell them to shut the fuck up. And I want you to, but I want you to do it because it's reasonable for those circumstances. And I want you to be able to adapt and transition into now talking to the grandma who lost her purse, right? We're not going to motherfuck her. We're going to talk to her in a totally different way and understanding it's okay to be different to different situations, just based off the information you have and what it is. And I think that specific thing is missed a lot in training right now. I think they're just so one-tracked mind, more robotic than I think they've ever been, that they feel like they can't be different to different they have to be one way. I have to be this, excuse me, sir. You know what I mean? So having the ability to be fluid with it. It's okay to let your guard down a little bit in certain situations, but you have to be smart enough and well-rounded enough to interpret the information to allow yourself to drop your guard a little bit. You don't want to drop your guard when you have no idea what's in front of you, right? We're going to be there, assessing everything that we need to, but it's just that mind of being able to adapt to your situations. But the passion portion of it for me is I'm a firm believer, dude. The very basic fundamental aspect of law enforcement is protection. We are there to protect the community members we swore an oath to protect, right? And so I want them to think of that first, not necessarily serving them. And the way that I mean by that is, yes, we need to provide a service for our community, but the way we do that, first and foremost, is to protect them. Going to a house and taking a report because someone stole FedEx boxes is not more important than the old lady who just got punched in the face by some 22-year-old and her $200 stolen out of her purse, right? So being able in law enforcement to say, hey, and yes, that is the priority, right? We're not going to the package theft before we go to this, but understanding that that's what you do. You do this to provide a service, right? But that's just a collateral of your job duties, right? I want you to focus on the main things, the most important things, and that is that protection. And yes, I do want cops who are hardened. I want cops who understand that the seriousness of the job, you have to be that way. And it when we talk about it, some people interpret that as a negative, right? No, I don't. I want sympathy and empathy. Well, you can absolutely have sympathy and empathy and still be a hardened street cop. And that hardness is not being taken advantage of. When someone immediately looks at you and goes, "You're fucking racist," you don't shake in your boots and just go, "Okay, you get a warning, just go," right? Because that's a tactic by that bad guy. He's making you feel like that because he wants you to just go, "Okay, fuck this. This isn't worth me being called a racist and all sorts of stuff. Here's your driver's license back. Get your brake light fixed. Just go." And then you go back to your car and you go away, right? No, I want you hardened enough to take that, and don't ignore it. But I want you hardened enough to take that and go, "Okay, all right, that's fine. We're still here though. You're not gonna make me nervous to the point where I'm like, all right, like I'm leaving." Because there are times, and there's a lot of times where you're gonna need to put your hands on people, and you're gonna have to combat violence with violence. And we can do that in a professional manner. But that well-roundedness of these newer cops, they have to be able to transition that. If you have to be violent with a violent person, okay, it stops when the handcuffs go on, right? But you don't harbor that violence and you don't keep it on you 24/7 because it's going to translate into every other call you go to. Having the ability to go, okay, right, put your gun back in your holster, and now you're at square one again. And whatever it is you need to do is based off the information that's coming at you on any call that you go to. But I do want hardened, no nonsense type of cops. I go on the internet and there's cops in full uniforms filming themselves for TikTok dancing and shit. I can tell you right now that never happened at my agency. You wouldn't work there if you did that. But that is what your community is seeing. That's what people will perceive police officers as. Well, this job must not be that serious if you're doing some dumb dance and posting it for views, right? And there's a lot of good cops who do social media stuff, right? Handing out skateboards and whatever. That's great. But it's a serious job, and we need serious people to do it, and we need people who understand to take it seriously. And that's not to be an asshole. It's not to feed into, the best part about this job is chasing people and all the things. Because I loved it. I love driving 120 miles an hour, chasing someone who just did something bad to somebody, right? And that's a big part of it. But it's not to the sense of like, I want these big burly cops who are just going to come through the door and put hands on people and not care about anything. I want thinkers who are that, right? And I always put it up against, like my agency did hire a lot of people out of the military, a lot of special forces individuals who came from all the different, branches of special forces. And I recognize that as being like, man, this is an opportunity for me. Because you get into a room with people like that, man, it's just they move differently. And I became a sponge, and I just absorbed the way that they handled everything. And they had the best way of handling violent situations or, verbal altercations that are getting to the point of maybe physical. And they just had the ability of being no nonsense, right? The individual they were dealing with understood who they were and what they were going to do or what they potentially were going to do without, being an asshole, without motherfucking them, without all of, and it captivated me because I only knew one way, right? If you were motherfucking me, I was motherfucking you back. And there was times where we kind of got into that back and forth, which isn't good, right? And those were learning lessons for me on the street that I needed to kind of develop the ability to let some of that shit slide and not feed into it. But they never did. And it was in every single aspect in law enforcement. It wasn't just with the bad guy, right? It was with the community event that they were walking around. You could tell just by the way they moved and just by the way that they were no nonsense. Like they had a side of them that they could handle any situation, but they didn't have to wear that on their sleeves, right? They didn't have to show you how bad they were, right? They didn't have to tell you how tough they were or how they operated. They, if that needed to come out, it would, but it would be done in a professional, quick manner, and it was over. And I was like, I want to be like that. And I started to mold myself that way as time went on. And that's really what I'm trying to translate into the next generation, where it's that preparation work before you get in, which is going to give you a foundation way easier to build upon than if you go into it, what you see on YouTube and what you learn in the police academy. Because the police academy is not going to give you what you need. It's going to give you enough to put your front foot through the door, and then the real learning becomes the FTO process, right? So if you have that foundation walking in the door, the success rate of you as an individual cop is going to be much better, because you already understand relatively, how to operate and how to be, and obviously learning curves big time with talking to people and initiating stops or initiating anything, right? Because you're like, oh shit, nervous, and then you do it for the first time and you're like, all right, let's get this, keep it going, right? But if you have that solid foundation and you know why you're there, you're well-rounded, you're organized with your investigations, you're a good beat partner, right? You're not screwing your beat partner who's got 5 reports and you're just being proactive. You understand the big picture is basically what it is. But with an emphasis on the fact that there's going to be more times than not where you're going to have to put hands on people and be violent. And we need to do it in a professional manner. The amount of crime we have in this country right now is why I say that, right? It's gotten so bad from my perspective that the United States is a dangerous place, man. You walk with your kids and you go to grocery shopping at Costco, you have no idea the evil that's around you. And you can walk through your life and be naive to it, and that's fine, because you have cops on the street who are there looking for them. And if we don't support them in that role and try to roll them back, no, you're not doing proactive police work anymore, there's going to be more evil that's walking around you. The only thing preventing bad things from happening are cops on the street doing their job. You want that cop who's 2:30, 3:30 in the morning driving around your neighborhood with his headlights off and his windows down, creeping around looking. He wants to see if someone's trying to break into your garage, break into your car, or whatever. But he's there for that single purpose at that time. He's not there to just try to let the hour go by like, fuck, man, I'm off in 5 hours. Like, let's just drive around. No, right? And there's many of those. And I see videos of these cops that shouldn't be in a uniform, man. And that's not because I think I'm God's gift to police work. I know that I wasn't, right? And it doesn't come from a conceited place. It comes from a confidence place. Like, I know how I worked. I know the results I got. So that's why I have the opinions that I do. If you are out of shape, fat, slug, lazy in a uniform, take them off. Take them off the street. Here's your ability. Here's 30 days. Get your shit together. And if you don't, you're gone. I don't care how many years you have on here, because you're not an asset anymore. You're a liability for everyone here, including the community members we serve. So the inconsistency of the individual cop, to me, I've seen it. It's insane nowadays. It just wasn't like that when I was working. Maybe it was the agency I was at or the environment I was in. I don't know. It just, for me, it's way more than it ever has been.
If somebody's interested in going to law enforcement and wants to get a hold of you at the Code 33 Project, how do they do it?
Yeah, go to our website, www.thecode33project. And there's a tab in there for a consultation. Submit your consultation. We'll give you a call and we'll set something up. And we're also on all the social media stuff, Facebook, Instagram, at the Code 33 Project.
Okay. Last couple questions.
Yeah.
Would you do anything differently?
I wouldn't. I wouldn't do a single thing different in my entire career, man. Other than maybe sticking it out in school a little bit longer as far as high school and getting my... it's funny. I went to one of my good buddies got married 2 weeks ago. And I go down there and I get to see all the people I worked with, right? It was awesome. And I sit down at the table. I'm like, what's up, boys? Like, they're like, oh, here's your box of crayons, you fucking idiot. Like, I'm like, thank you. Good to see you. I haven't seen you in 5 years, asshole. But that's how it was. You know, when I first got in there, report writing, right? I was like fucking typing like this. And, you know, so the only thing I think I would have changed was preparation with organizational skills and just writing in general. Because that's a huge aspect of law enforcement, man. And you know, I in California, I spent a lot of time in court. I was in court all the time. And getting that, you know, being able to talk efficiently and, you know, not on stage, but on the stands. You got bad guy, his attorney, judge, you know, district attorney, and then you have everybody else in there. It's a stressful time to be able to answer those questions. But that organizational aspect goes into the investigation, right? Because like when we go back to serving our community, when you take that package theft, right? Like I want cops who don't just take the report and now they're off to the next thing. Like I want you to do your due diligence, package up a good investigation, right? That way when you go to court, or you can get that person's shit back, which is the most important thing. But when you go to court, you're not a soup sandwich. You don't sound like an idiot. You don't sound like you don't have your stuff together, right? You're organized, you're straight to the point. And so that preparation work before, I think, is the only thing I would change. But as far as decision making and everything else in my career, man, not a thing.
How about law enforcement affecting your family? How did it affect it?
Yeah. I think it affected my family quite a bit. You know, and that's coming from the point of view of my entire family's in law enforcement. So this wasn't something that they had no idea about, right? And you know, my dad was, I think, exactly like me, man. He was a proactive cop in the late 80s, early 90s, and you know, that was a different time. So he had his own incidents and had his own things and understood it. My uncle, who worked for Daly City, was in shootings, and my cousin was in 4 of them. So like, this was nothing new, but I think the specifics of how many times I was kind of in things definitely affected my specific family at home. My wife, my sisters, my mom, right? They started to see like, you know, I'm coming home, I broke my hand, I had to go to surgery fighting some gang member. Like I had smoke inhalation from pulling some lady out of her house. Like there was things where I'd come home, I'd black eye, knuckles were bleeding. Like I would come home with physical things on me that they would see. Like, where the fuck did that come from? Like, I was in a 148, or I was in a fight last night with this dude, and this is what it is, right? So they had a little introduction to what it is. My wife was a dispatcher, right? She understood it. My mom, been married, cops, all, you know what I mean? So they had that understanding, but I think the one thing was the shooting, the specifics to that shooting, where the guy actually pulled the trigger on me, and it wasn't a real gun, thank God. But the mindset of how did that even happen? Look how close you got. That affected for sure my wife, for sure my immediate family tremendously. It scared the shit out of them. And so that was another part that I had to rebuild, right? Because they were living in constant fear. And then you tell, you know, your wife, hey, your police department that you dispatch for got a call, and they're going to be driving cars around our house all night because there's a possibility of someone coming and trying to find out where we live. And she's looking at me like, are you fucking kidding me? Right. And then where I lived wasn't as busy where I worked, right? There wasn't as much crime and, you know, there was definitely crime, but nothing like where I worked. So for her and everything she was hearing and dealing with was at a different pace. So her introduction to an officer-involved shooting was mine, and it came with all of this extra baggage, you know, news and all of these things. So it absolutely, you know, affected my family. And then through my PTSD struggles, rough deal, man. It went on for a couple years. I mean, it's still, you know, there today. I have a much better approach to it. Right? It starts out the same every day. I do the same exact things that I know will help me throughout my day. But she was there for the whole struggle of that. I mean, there was times, man, where I'd put her through a lot of shit, blowing holes in walls, punching walls, and breaking shit just out of complete anger. So it, my kids were around that at a young age, man. And so, there was rebuilding that needed to be done by me, because of my behavior. And I certainly wasn't going to use PTSD as an excuse for all of that. And I made that decision late, right? Because through those initial struggles, man, I leaned on it. I was like, well, I justified every mistake. Well, it's because I'm dealing with fucking this shit. And I've, drinking 6 beers. Couldn't be the beers. It's got to be the fucking, so it was just a cultivation, man, of both alcohol and me not doing what I needed to do to make me, my day-to-day go smoother and find that peace. And it wasn't until I got myself into some good treatment, and completely changed my relationship with alcohol that I began that rebuilding process. And it's been great ever since. So I'm happy about it. I got a good foot forward, but certainly affected them tremendously.
Last question. Can you look back on when you started law enforcement till now? How did it affect the way that you see people?
That's a big one, man. Man, like I had just said a couple minutes ago, it showed me that there's unfortunately, to me, it made me feel like there's more evil than there's good in this world. It made me not trust many people. As a cop, man, everyone lies to you. That's all you're dealing with, is lying. And, that trust in your neighbor was gone. I've rebuilt it a little bit, but even till today, I'm very standoffish. I wouldn't say I'm isolated, but I'm definitely got a very tight circle around me and have no desire to increase that. And I think that comes straight from law enforcement and having interactions with everybody that I did.
Nick, thanks for the interview. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. I appreciate it too. Thank you. It was good meeting you.
All right.